All right, let's get right into it. This is a story that absolutely took over the internet. It's about a celebrity cat named Wukong, loved by millions, who suddenly dies. But this wasn't just some sad story about losing a pet. Oh no, it exploded into this wild tale of conspiracy, of accusations, and honestly, it's a masterclass in how media can be manipulated. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and deconstruct how this whole online tragedy was built, piece by piece, and what it really tells us about finding the truth when traffic is king. So the story the world was first told was pretty straightforward and absolutely devastating. You have this popular influencer, he's heartbroken, and he announces that his best friend, his traveling companion Wukong, has been killed. But here's the twist. He doesn't say it was an accident. He claims it was a targeted poisoning, a malicious attack from some kind of shadowy enemy. And that single accusation, that was the match that lit an absolute wildfire online. Okay, so let's start by looking at the official story, the one we were all meant to believe. The owner, a guy named Zhao Shuo, presented himself as this grieving victim. He wasn't just mourning, he was on a mission. He framed Wukong's death not as a tragic random accident, but as a deliberate, cruel act. It was his personal loss turned into a public crusade for justice against some powerful, unseen enemy. But what's really fascinating is how the story changed. It wasn't set in stone from day one. On April 15th, the day Wukong actually died, the owner's first thought, his initial suggestion, was a car accident. But then, just 5 days later, the narrative takes this dramatic 90-degree turn. Suddenly, Zhao Shuo is claiming that not one, not two, but 3 different hospitals all diagnosed poisoning. And by May 4th, it had escalated into a full-blown production, a formal video accusing these unnamed enemies of a poisoning attack. The narrative was officially locked in. Right, but here's the thing. Almost as fast as that story was built, cracks started to show. You had investigators, veterinary experts, all sorts of smart people starting to look at the details Zhao Shuo was providing. And the science? Well, the science just wasn't adding up. Not at all. And this really gets us to the heart of the matter, the one question that could make the whole thing fall apart. The entire poisoning theory, everything, was built on the claim that the cat died within a 20-minute window. So the big question became, is that even possible? Could the kind of poison he was talking about really work that fast?
And the answer, from a medical standpoint, is a resounding no. It's just not how it works. See, the most common type of rodent poison, the kind he was alluding to, is an anticoagulant. It stops the blood from clotting. But that's a slow process. It takes anywhere from 3 to 7 days to become fatal, not 20 minutes. So the central claim of the whole story was, scientifically speaking, impossible.
And it wasn't just the timing that was off. The physical evidence he presented didn't line up either. The owner pointed to dark blood from Wukong's nose and mouth as his proof of poisoning, but veterinarians immediately flagged this. That's actually a classic sign of something else entirely, suffocation or heat stroke, where intense pressure in the body causes something called pulmonary edema. The symptoms of that kind of poisoning, they're totally different. Slow internal bleeding, weakness, pale gums, things that show up over days. So here we are with 2 competing theories. On one hand, you've got a secret, super fast-acting poison that defies all known biology, used by a mysterious conspiracy. On the other hand, you have a common heartbreaking accident. There's this principle called Occam's razor, right? It basically says the simplest explanation is probably the right one. And that conspiracy theory, it needed a whole mountain of assumptions to even begin to make sense. So, just as the whole scientific case was falling apart, investigators found something else, a digital trail. And this is where the story pivots hard. We move from veterinary science to digital forensics, and we start to uncover a motive that has nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with business. This digital trail got really weird really fast. The owner was supposedly in Xinjiang, which is way out in the west of China, yet the IP address for his social media account kept jumping thousands of miles to the city of Chongqing, a huge media hub. And this wasn't random. It happened specifically when he was uploading these big emotional videos. The excuses for this just kept changing, too. First, it was a technical glitch, then it was a Wi-Fi issue, and finally, he claimed it was a hacker attack. Each excuse just got less and less believable. So, why Chongqing? What's the deal with that city? Well, this is where we need to understand a little term, MCN. It stands for multi-channel network. Think of it like a talent agency and a production studio all rolled into one, but for internet influencers.
They handle the business side of things, the production, the marketing, making money, while the creator just focuses on the content. And guess what? It turns out Zhao Shuo was backed by a big MCN, based in Chongqing.
And that, right there, reveals the financial playbook. This was never really about truth. It was about generating traffic. Step 1. Create a sensational topic, this poison conspiracy, to get a massive viral surge of attention. Step 2. Keep that fire burning, with constant updates and clues to keep people hooked. And finally, Step 3. Harvest all that traffic. You monetize the sympathy through things like live stream gifts and selling merchandise. It turns out that tragedy, if you package it the right way, can be incredibly profitable.
Okay, so the conspiracy theory is debunked, and we've uncovered a really powerful financial motive to create a different story. So now we can use the actual evidence to piece together what most likely really happened on that day.
What we're left with is a chain of really predictable but deeply unfortunate events. At just after 4 p.m., Wukong is left alone outside a museum. He's stressed, he's scared, he's in a strange place. So he does what any cat would do. He runs for safety. And his safe zone? The parking lot nearby, where he'd spent hours the night before, leaving his scent everywhere. True to his known habit, he hides in the undercarriage of a car for cover. Someone starts that car, and within that crucial 20-minute window, the combination of engine heat and being in a confined space was, tragically, fatal.
And this is the part that makes so much sense. This wasn't some random act of evil. As any cat behavior expert will tell you, this was a sadly predictable outcome. A scared cat is always going to look for a small, dark, enclosed space where it feels protected. In that moment, for Wukong, the car undercarriage, which even had his own scent on it, was the most logical and safest feeling option he had.
But you know, this story is so much bigger than just one cat or one influencer. It's really a perfect case study in how modern media manipulation works. So let's zoom out for a second and arm ourselves with a toolkit, a way to spot these kinds of tactics out in the wild so we can all be smarter consumers of the content we see every day.
So here are 4 huge red flags to look out for. First, a huge focus on emotion, but a real lack of hard, verifiable evidence. Zhao Shuo, for instance, showed us X-rays, but never the one thing that could have proven his case, a simple toxicology report. Second, citing experts or authorities you can't actually verify, like the 3 hospitals that later couldn't back up his story. Third big one, attacking anyone who asks legitimate questions, calling them accomplices or haters. And fourth, a timeline or a story that keeps changing every time it gets challenged.
When you see these tactics in play, you have to remember that it all boils down to this one simple fact. In these carefully crafted online dramas, the main goal is never about finding or sharing the truth. The goal is to generate attention, engagement, likes, shares, comments. The goal isn't truth, it's traffic.
And that really leaves us with a pretty tough question, doesn't it? When a story is perfectly engineered to hijack our emotions, our outrage, and our sympathy, when the actual facts are buried under a mountain of these emotional appeals, how do we, the audience, actually learn to tell the difference between what's real and what's been manufactured for our clicks?